So let's go to our next speaker. The next one to present is one of the pioneers of ADU, starting from 2012 with his own ADU project in Portland. He begins to develop an interest and passion for ADU since then. Realizing the huge untapped market of ADU from Portland, Oregon, he has disseminated his program and influence to California. This guy I'm introducing right now is Kol Peterson, my model and my coach. Hi, welcome, Kol.
Hi, thanks for having me, Catherine.
Okay, so Kol, before you start, I'd like to introduce you for a little bit. Kol is the owner of Accessory Dwelling Strategies LLC, a company dedicated to ADU-related education, advocacy, and consulting. Kol edits and manages accessorydwellings.org and buildinganadu.com websites that address ADU policy issues and features an array of ADU projects in Portland, state of Oregon. Kol has also wrote the book that I mentioned on ADU Backdoor Revolution, the definitive guide to ADU development, runs Portland citywide ADU tour, offers homeowner-focused ADU courses, and delivers ADU education, speaking, and consulting for a variety of audiences. So, Kol, I have talked with you and studied your website and bought your book. So I myself benefit a lot from your courses and your knowledge. So go ahead, what will you talk about today and what will you share with us?
Thanks, Catherine. Yeah, that's great to hear. And that's kind of the role that I hope I can play for people, is help people understand both homeowners and industry professionals more about ADUs and the opportunities that they offer. So today we're going to talk about lessons from Portland that are hopefully transferable to you all. So for some context, should I just go ahead, Catherine?
Yes, please.
Okay, great. So, so for some context, I'll just explain that Portland has kind of been seen as one of the leading cities in the country probably the leading city in the country for ADUs for a while, and the movement here kind of took off in 2010, which is when I built my ADU, and so it's kind of taken off in a big way. And it's leveled off a little bit as of 2018. But, meanwhile, in California, the movement kind of really kicked off in a big way in 2017 and 2018 as a result of state legislation. So what's happening now in California, the Bay Area, LA, is really kind of a really good mirroring some of the patterns that have occurred in Portland. So I'll talk a little bit about that more today in today's presentation. So without further ado, I'm going to pull up my presentation. And here we go. Ugh. Bear with me 1 minute. Okay. So, as Catherine mentioned, I have a book, Backdoor Revolution, right there. It's called Backdoor Revolution, The Definitive Guide to ADU Development. So I'll be alluding to some of the content from that book today. And I'd recommend picking up a copy of the book. It's available on Amazon, on my own website, $25 for a print copy, $15 for a digital version of it. And it goes through a lot of information for homeowners and for professionals. So, so as Catherine mentioned, I kind of do ADU related things full time, run websites, run a tour, have a book, have a tiny house hotel, teach classes for homeowners and realtors, consult with homeowners about ADUs. I run an ADU Academy, which is for industry professionals. I have an ADU specialist designation in partnership with an organization up here called Earth Advantage, but we run that throughout the country. Consult for city, states, and organizations about ADUs. And I do a lot of policy work related to ADUs, middle housing regulations in Oregon and elsewhere. So accessory dwelling units, you guys have heard about what they are. They're second housing units on single family lots. They can come in a variety of different structural forms. All of these are viable structural forms of ADUs. I'm going to talk a little bit about like some of the demographic drivers of ADUs right now. So, because I think this is important for everybody to kind of get when you think about ADUs and the role that they're playing. There's some really specific reasons why they are playing an important role right now, and that this is intended to give you confidence if you are considering building an ADU as to why it's a good investment, but also the bigger policy role that ADUs can play. So in 1940, the average household size was 3.6. In 2010, the average household size was like 2.5. So we've had this dramatic kind of decline in the number of people living in an average property over the last 50 years. And if you look at just single family households, that is people living alone in single family homes, this graph shows you how many people are living alone in single family homes. So like in DC, 45% of all the households are one person households. Seattle, 41%. New York, 33%. I don't know what it is for San Francisco, but it's probably about that, probably 40 to 45% of single family home of households are one person households. Meanwhile, the average single family home size, not the household size, but the home size has increased dramatically over time. From 1950, it was 900 square feet. In 2010, it's 2,600 square feet. So homes are getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And there's a variety of reasons for that. But then if you take those two data points together and you mush them together, what that means is that our average per capita square footprint has gone from 292 square feet to 1,023 square feet from 1950 to 2013. This is a good thing if you want lots of space, but it's not such a good thing if you are concerned about affordable housing or about the preservation of the planet, because it turns out that one of the biggest ways that we can reduce our climate footprint is to reduce the size of the structure in which we live. And so as we are doing all that we can to address climate change, we are simultaneously living in larger and larger spaces in the US. And so ADUs are kind of a solution to hack the single family zone to allow for more space efficient housing to meet that demographic demand for those 1 and 2 person households. So it's kind of providing a lot of impetus to create a housing type that matches the type of housing demographic demand we actually have in the United States. So I'm going to talk a little bit here about Portland's trajectory with ADUs over the last decade. So in 2000, Portland had really good ADU codes. There was no minimum lot size requirements, no parking requirements. They were allowed by right. There was no owner occupancy requirements. We allowed internal ADUs, detached ADUs that could be up to 800 square feet. We had reduced impact fees. And still, nonetheless, we had very few ADUs going in. For people's reference, Portland, Oregon is about 550, 600,000 people. So it's a pretty big city. It's the biggest city in Oregon. So it wasn't really till 2010 that the city said, okay, we like ADUs. We've done all these things for ADUs, but still they're not being built in any significant way. What else can we do? We're going to waive the residential impact fees for ADUs and see what that does. And lo and behold, that is what kickstarted the movement here in Portland. And so as soon as those $10,000 of fees were waived or eliminated on a temporary basis, the number of ADUs started to go up in a big way. And that's right when I built my ADU and I started documenting it on a blog and then teaching classes about it. And then in 2015, they made some additional changes. And so we saw this very dramatic uptick of ADU development. So it went up by like 22-fold from what it was in 2009 to 2016. So this is dramatic curve. Now, after 2016, 2018, it kind of tabled off a little bit. So we might see that in California too. Who knows, after 6-7 years of ADU development. But right now, we're only like 2 or 3 years into a very dramatic curve happening in California, which I'm going to show now. So I call this the hockey stick effect. Okay, because it looks kind of like a hockey stick, right? So what are the things that cities must do in order to see more ADUs built, and cities and states in this case, because the state of California's codes effectively supersede the local jurisdictional codes in California. So it is important that we waive or eliminate owner occupancy requirements. That this is a legacy standard that exists in a lot of jurisdictions, but now the California code says between 2020 and 2025, there's no owner occupancy requirements, which is great. And California has effectively removed all off-street parking requirements, not exactly, but for the most part they have. And then there's other restrictive development regulations that that I think some of which have been dealt with, some of which have not. The height limits on ADUs right now in California, it varies by jurisdiction. For example, in San Jose, you can build a 2-story ADU. In Los Angeles, you can build a 2-story ADU. But the bulk of California, you can only build a 16-foot high ADU, and that's a problem if you want to see more ADUs built. So that would be the next kind of thing to tackle from a legislative regulatory perspective, I believe. Property line setbacks in California are really good. They're 4 feet. Size limits are up to 1,200 square feet, so that's really good. Minimum lot sizes, there's no minimum lot size. There's no limitation on structural form of ADU. There's the residential impact fees have largely been waived for ADUs in California, but there still might be some other fees, such as school impact fees, that you might be incurred in California, and which can be pretty expensive. So from an advocacy point of view, those are some of the things that you might want to look at if you're wanting to see more ADUs built. Like I said, California's got really good codes. They could be slightly better, but they're really good. So you all are in a good position to build ADUs at this point. And as a result of these really good regulations, we are seeing dramatic spikes in ADU development throughout California jurisdictions. These are just a handful of jurisdictions where we're seeing this hockey stick effect just starting to occur. And you can imagine if in 2 or 3 years, this curve is going to be up here. So it's really going to continue in a big way in San Jose, in Los Angeles, in Berkeley, in Oakland. And it's really exciting to see what's going to happen on the horizon with that. But that's kind of what I anticipate happening because those codes are so good. These are all having this hockey stick effect. Austin, Texas is another good example of a city where they've eliminated the regulatory barriers. The land values are really expensive, just like they are in the Bay Area. And as a result, the inevitable outcome of that is, high land values, dominant single-family residential zoning, met with liberalized ADU regulations will result almost inevitably in a spike in ADU development, the hockey stick effect. And these are all smaller cities in California that are also experiencing dramatic rises in ADU development. One of the resources I wanted to point people to, if you don't already know it, is the California Department of Housing and Community Development has a free accessory dwelling unit handbook. It's a little bit difficult to penetrate, to read through it, but it's kind of the authoritative guide in California for people who are wanting to build ADUs in terms of what regulations municipalities must follow. So I would recommend checking that out. I'm going to just pull up a few more slides here. Go back. So, okay. Sorry about that. All right, I'm not going to do full screen because I want to make sure to get through these. So it's not just the regulations that need to be improved. It's also education and awareness building. Right now, California, ADUs are fairly new. And so there needs to be a lot of things like this event that are helping to educate people about what these things are, why they're so great. And then there's still going to be need to be political advocacy to improve the regulations and address different issues that arise. So there needs to be some kind of coalitions that emerge to support the advocacy of ADUs and work with local governments and state governments to ensure that ADUs are, as easy to build as the state officials want them to be. Local media coverage of ADUs is a good thing in terms of increasing awareness about ADUs. So I like to see local stories that cover first-person narratives about people who've built ADUs and how it's changed their life. Websites that give information about ADUs, like our website, accessorydwellings.org, which is really intended to be a national website that gives a whole bunch of examples of ADUs that have been built and how much they cost and who the designers and builders were, are a good thing. And homeowners who are building ADUs just inherently, natively serve as good spreaders of the message about ADUs, because it's fun to talk about it. When you're going through this experience of building an ADU, it's a big project. It's the biggest project of people's lives oftentimes. And so people like to talk about it. But going back to what I was saying before, regulations really do matter. And it's a good thing that California now has very good regulations. They're a little bit difficult to understand, but if you work with a good architect or designer, you'll get through it and understand it. And for the most part, you'll be able to build an ADU on any property. So I wanted to mention a few resources that I have that might be of interest to people. So for real estate agents, I have a class that isn't available yet, but it's going to be on the California Association of Realtors website. It's a 3-hour course. And this is a way to obtain both get an ADU specialist designation, and I'll talk about that here in a minute. The ADU specialist designation is a designation that realtors can get and append to their insignia to show that they have some degree of education about ADUs. And we have local classes offered that are 4 hours long in the Bay Area and Los Angeles and Seattle and Portland. And so if there's realtors on the phone who are on the call who are interested in getting the ADU specialist designation, I'd recommend checking out this website, aduspecialist.org. There's a number of industry professionals that have already been certified in the Bay Area, as well as all throughout the country. This is the book that I mentioned earlier. It's available at buildinganadu.com. And this is a web course that's really for homeowners. So the book is both for homeowners and industry professionals. This is a course that I offer that's on buildinganadu.com. That is a 4-hour long course, and it's very detail oriented and goes through 40 quick tip videos of people building ADUs and the best practices for design and utility connections, and also goes through all the other stuff like costs and financing that tend to be very challenging for people, and how to find a general contractor and an architect and how to work with them, and what are the best practices for renting out a space. So there's a lot of things that are nationally applicable, and then there's a number of things that are also very locally specific, and that's where using your local building professionals and your local design professionals is going to be extremely helpful. So this is my contact information if you'd like to reach out to me. And I think I'll stop there, Catherine, and see if there's any questions.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you for a presentation called very informative. But when you mentioned about the ADU specialist for the professional realtor, for example, what's the use of being an ADU specialist?
It's it's basically just a designation that you can append to your email insignia and use in marketing to show that you have gone the extra mile to get education and that you know more than the average person about ADUs. That's kind of the intent. In order to obtain the ADU specialist designation, you need to both take one of the courses that's offered both locally or online, and then also have a green specialist designation. And you can find out about those criteria on aduspecialist.org.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so there's Albert Joe raised a question. Won't the exploding growth of ADU being built affect the profit margin that a single ADU would bring?
No, it won't. These things like these explosive growth is a relative term, because so Portland is by far leading the pack with ADUs, right? And if you look at Portland, of all single family residential properties, we now have a huge success in that 2% of all of the single family residential properties now have an ADU. And so it's a very small number. In California, it's not even close to that. It's like 0.1% or something, So there's a huge potential. And I would say, if we look at the demographic spread, you could say that roughly 60 to 70% of all households in California, in Portland, and everywhere in the US are 1 and 2-person households. And so that 60 to 70% of the population right now is being forced into purchasing homes that are vastly more expensive than what they can really afford or what they want, because that's what's supplied on the market. There's single family homes that are 3-bedroom, 4-bedroom homes. There is so much need for 1-bedroom small units in desirable neighborhoods. That is why there's no fear of there being a lack of demand for this housing type. So yeah, I'll leave it there.
Okay, so the same question that I raised to Senator Bob Wilkowski, that I know from you that state of Oregon is undergoing the legislation for the allowing the subdivision of the property with an ADU project. So how's it about?
Yeah, so it's called Oregon House Bill 2001.
Okay.
And it's going into effect this summer, and it's going to allow duplexes everywhere throughout all Oregon. And then next summer, it's going to allow for triplexes and fourplexes in all large cities in Oregon, in the entire Portland metro area. So there's like 22 cities, I think, that are subject to this. So every single family residential property will allow for not just an ADU, but also a duplex or a triplex or a fourplex. And so I think that's kind of the trajectory that that's the kind of getting at addressing that same problem statement that I was going over with that ADUs are solving, which is it's allowing more market-based approach to solving the affordable housing crisis by allowing for more diverse housing types within this dominant single-family residential neighborhood zoning type that we have in the United States.
Okay. So because the state of Oregon has go far more than state of California, because we only start from 2017, you have been 10 years ahead of us. So what's the financing programs that homeowners or investors can approach to or can borrow money, get their ADU project financed? What kind of that we can borrow?
Yeah, so I mean, so it's going to be the same things that already, you can already do in California right now. That it's there are some special programs that I'll talk about in a second, but the vast majority, 90% of people are just using home equity lines of credit, cash out refinance, cash savings, family loans, credit card debt. Like kind of standard stuff. Now, the stuff that I'm working on from an advocacy kind of point of view is construction loan financing through both GSE backed construction loan products like Fannie Mae's Homestyle Renovation Loan and FHA's 203K loan. But and then there's local lenders that do what are called portfolio loans. And right now in California, there's a big market. I would say there's a need for local lenders, local regional banks and credit unions to offer construction loan products that are good for ADUs, and they can have looser underwriting criteria than Fannie and Freddie can use. So I think there's more need for experimentation going on to occur in that space. There's also mission-driven nonprofits. For example, in the Bay Area, there's Housing Trust Silicon Valley, which offers a standalone ADU construction loan that's good for up to $250,000, I think. And so there's different efforts like that. There's also innovative financing going on with companies that are building the whole ADU for you and then financing it and then taking 2/3 of the rental income. There's 5 companies doing that. One in California, one in Los Angeles called United Dwelling, one called Homestead, one called Rent the Backyard in Northern California. I think there's ADU Builder in San Jose. So I think there's a lot of different innovative financing options going on in that space. But like I said, most people who are building ADUs are using cash out refinancing and renovation loan and home equity lines of credit, and then in conjunction other cash that they have on hand, such as 401k loans. If you have a 401k, that's a great. You can borrow up to $50,000 on your 401k, and that's a really good, I would say, smart way to invest your retirement money. So yeah.
Okay, okay. So because the ADU is a pretty new stuff in the whole California, so many things that many of the vendors providers don't know how to deal with those kind of new stuff. So for example, for the property appraisal, yeah, so it is not very friendly for the properties with adding an ADU, no matter it's attached or detached ADU, especially for detached ADU. So there are many independent appraisers. They don't have any experience on appraiser with the ADU project. So what's your experience or what's your knowledge on the same thing in the state of Oregon?
Yeah, good question. All right, so appraisals have historically been a very big challenge for ADUs for the very reasons that you stated. It's a chicken and egg problem in every market where ADUs are becoming popular. There isn't any sales comps, and so appraisers don't know how to find sales comps and give adequate value for ADUs. So I'm pulling up here a presentation I would recommend for people who are this is maybe for more for industry professionals. If you go to buildinganadu.com, click on the ADU hour, and then go to this link. I've put out there a presentation for free for anybody to check out. That is this one right here. And this is a hour-long presentation by a professional appraiser who did a study of the contributory value of ADUs on properties. It's a little study. It was from Portland, Oregon. So it's not necessarily going to be transferable everywhere in the country, but it starts to explore this issue of how much value an ADU adds to a property. What we do not want to see is appraisers only giving $10,000 of value for a property that just added a $200,000 ADU. That would undermine the market for ADUs. What we want to see is some emerging consensus on ADUs add significant value, but how much value, we don't know. As a finger in the wind guess, I sometimes say, ADUs will add 50% of what they cost to construct, but that's literally just a guess. It's very situation dependent, and unfortunately, there isn't a really good answer to the question because if you talk to an appraiser, they're going to say the only way I can know how much value this adds is to look at sales comps. And the problem is anybody who builds an ADU doesn't want to sell that property because why would you? It's a great cash cow. So you're not going to see a lot of sales comps for a long time. I mean, you'll start to see them. Now, Portland ADUs have been around for 10 years. So we actually do have about 300 sales of properties with ADUs over the last couple of years. So there is actually enough sales comps, but that won't happen in California for at least a couple more years.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So yeah, in my later interview, I'm planning for interview with some independent experienced appraisers who has the kind of experience on appraising the properties with ADU, especially for those homeowners finding independent professional appraiser that is friendly to ADU appraiser. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I'll give one tip, which is maybe look for appraisers who are comfortable with appraising duplexes and triplexes, because an ADU, you can use the income-based valuation method to inform the opinion of value. And so an appraiser who understands that can at least use that as another mechanism to inform their opinion of value above and beyond just sales comps, which might be difficult to find.
Okay, yeah, I agree. Yeah, there's a Charles Liu raised a question for fourplex in existing single-family neighborhoods in Portland. How did you solve the parking problem? Do they also have a being within half mile from a bus stop requirement? Even if it does, the truth is that hardly anybody takes a bus.
Yeah, so I mean, this parking is always a very controversial topic, right? In every place. Portland is eliminating all residential off-street parking requirements for every housing type. There is no off-street parking requirements anymore anywhere in Portland as of this summer. So that's a brand new thing. That's the approach Portland is taking. In the statewide legislation, the approach is going to be that if you build a fourplex, depending on the lot size, you will have to build either one off-street parking spot or two at most. So So Portland and Oregon have taken a very aggressive stance on this to say that, we, the state, the city has understood that off-street parking requirements are a very significant barrier to building housing. And as to push back on your question regarding, what do you do about the fact that everybody drives and doesn't actually take the bus? Well, I'm going to say that might be true, but I want us all to fundamentally think about what are we, if the option is between building an off-street parking spot, a garage or a parking pad, and a housing unit, which one is more important, right? Which one is going to help more? And ultimately, a house is more important. It's going to provide housing for people. There's an affordable housing crisis. We're not getting away from that anytime soon in California. We need more housing. And you know what? People can walk a couple blocks. Worst case scenario, like that. That's what it is. That's the trade-off. And, I know that doesn't work for everybody, but that's kind of what it boils down to. It's like right now for 100 years, 50 years anyway, we've been prioritizing vehicle habitat over human habitat. And we have to change our thinking about that.
Okay, thank you. And there's a Shuo Yang, a question about talking about ADU appraisal. Can the guest talk about selling process for the property adding an ADU? Is it super complex compared with a regular single family home?
No, it's not super complex. The complexity is for the realtor understanding how to properly list the property. Now, one of the good things about the ADU movement kind of starting to surge in California is that there's going to be a whole lot of homeowners who are going to start to hear about ADUs, and they're going to start to want to buy a property that has either ADU potential, which basically every property does, or better still has an ADU on it. So over time, we're going to see more and more demand amongst homeowners who want to purchase properties that have ADUs on it. So I think basically a realtor just has to be savvy enough to say, hey, this property has an ADU, income generating ADU on it. And hopefully that will improve the resale value of that property accordingly.